Progressive Caucus as led by the MK party as the official opposition, and Dr. Mandla Antlope as the official leader of the opposition in the National Assembly. After the Democratic Alliance, which was the official opposition for the past administrations, has effectively become part of the executive of the country and ultimately part of cabinet, making the MK party the official opposition within the country. They will be taking that opposition role. They are saying they are bringing back the issue of the Pala Section 89 report and the impeachment process of President Ramaphosa after that particular report found that there may have been some wrongdoing from the president and that Parliament must look into these particular matters. Julius Malema saying that they will bring back this particular issue, and if the Speaker of the National Assembly, Togoti Diza, says this was dealt by the 6th administration, she is wrong. She must communicate with the political parties through normal communication channels of the National Assembly, saying that they can bring back this particular issue of the 7th administration, saying that the ANC bombarded other political formations due to the numbers that the ANC had at the time and were the majority. And this time around, they are no longer the majority. Democratic Alliance has said that they are supporting any impeachment process against the president over Pala because you've got a far worse scenario of the VBS bank that hangs over the economic freedom fighters leaders, which will be Chivambu and also Julius Silo Malema. Effectively, these are progressive parties within the Progressive Caucus have a set of priorities: land expropriation without compensation, the nationalization of the highest commanding heights of the economy, the banks, the mines, and also the strategic sectors of the economy, land expropriation without compensation, and also particularly the changing of the South African Constitution to be Afrocentric. Bongiwe.
Samkele, you know, we were in conversation earlier on with the national chairperson of the ANC, Gwede Mantashe. He says that the parties that do not have any items on the agenda are going to be resuscitating, issues, and he was referring to this issue of Pala. But it does seem that, for the Progressive Forum, for them, it's the issue of Pala, it's the issue of land, it's the issue of the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. It's also a myriad of other issues which they talk about, as they say, that they're coming to Parliament to represent the groups that have been marginalized in South Africa. And one wonders, especially when it comes to the numbers, let's talk about some of what they've had to say around how much support they are going to be enjoying in order to try and ensure that they bring about these changes.
Essentially, Bongiwe, you've got the Progressive Caucus, which has about 106 members of parliament, which is a growth, particularly knowing that the MK party came in and swept about 57 members of parliament that are effectively representing this political formation, joined by those of the economic freedom fighters and that of the NCC and UAT and also Vuyo Zungula's ATM. But there will be an issue-to-issue basis where the Progressive Caucus will be voting with other political formations on an issue-to-issue basis where they agree. They will vote with the ANC on certain issues they agree with the governing African National Congress on issues where they align with the DA. They will vote with them. For instance, if you look at the issue of Pala in the 6th administration, the DA and the EFF voted together. This time around, in a press briefing held by DA leader John Steenhuisen, he said that they would not be voting for the impeachment process of the president on Pala, which has brought about inconsistencies and also the question of whether the DA is principled or not on this particular issue. Looking at that, in the 6th administration, they voted for the Section 89 report and the impeachment process of the president, which pretty much angered the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mvunyelwa Mbeki, when the ANC voted against this particular adoption of the Section 89 This time around, you've got the DA that is seemingly in cahoots with the governing African National Congress and blocking out this particular Section 89 report or impeachment process of President Ramaphosa, which brings about the issue whether the DA has now put its interests in government ahead of its very same interests it had in the 6th administration when it was the official opposition. And also, it brings about the question of the implementation of the resolutions taken by the ANC's 2017 conference of the renationalization of the South African Reserve Bank, the land expropriation without compensation, which speaks to the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution, and obviously the political wranglings that are there between the predecessor of Cyril Ramaphosa, that would be Jacob Gedlaitlekisa Zuma, and the incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa, which ultimately led to the formation of the MK party. It is very clear that the MK party has no love for the incumbent president of the Republic of South Africa. For instance, you listen to what the leader of the official opposition had to say. That would be Dr. Mandla Kayise, John Hlophe, where he said that those parties that are part of the GNU are contaminated and they no longer seek the liberation of the downtrodden and the African people within this particular country, but saying that they will be engaging with some of these parties in the GNU on an issue-to-issue basis. But it is fundamentally about the people, the liberation of the people, as purported by this particular Progressive Caucus, which themselves, they come under a lot of cloud, if one may say. Judge John Hlophe impeached from the judiciary by this particular 6th administration that was led by the ANC, where the DA and the ANC voted for the impeachment of Judge John Hlophe and the removal of the then public protector advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, who is an MP of the EFF. You've got some people whom are saying they've got some questionable characters in the caucus of the MK party, naming the likes of Des van Rooyen and many others within that particular caucus. But the ANC in itself harbors a lot of people who've got a dark cloud hanging over their heads, particularly when you look at the digital vibes, when you look at the charges conferred against Zizi Kodwa on the issues of corruption, when you look at the likes of Malusi Nkanyezi Kigaba as well, implicated in state capture, when you look at David Mahlobo. But you also go to the Democratic Alliance. They are also harboring a lot of individuals who've been accused of racism. For instance, you look at one particular MP who is now being investigated by the Democratic Alliance, who had said that the videos of him spewing racial remarks were not true and that were fabricated, but it came out to be true that those videos particularly exist. You've also had a number of people within the Democratic Alliance who faked their own qualifications. Some of them have left the National Assembly. So you've got a myriad of issues from all political formations in the country. None of them are as squeaky clean as they may claim to be, Bongiwe.
Samkele, of course, even listening to the presidential spokesperson, Vincent Makwenya, in conversation with Bulelani Philip a short while ago, he says that the address by the president is going to basically encompass the unity that he says is within the government of national unity. And I suppose a lot of South Africans will be looking to see if that is indeed the case, especially when, he tables it, how much of it speaks to what would have come out from the Lekgotla, for example, how much of it also speaks to what some of these individual parties would have stood for, especially in the lead up to the elections. And at the same time, you do have that statement of intent. So there's quite a lot of balls that he needs to juggle right now.
There is a lot of balls that he needs to particularly juggle at this point in time as the President of the Republic of South Africa. The economic interests of these political formations differ. You look at the Democratic Alliance, they are pursuing an economy that particularly seeks to liberate the private sector, less state ownership, but the ANC prides itself on building the capacity of the state from time to time, the ownership of these state-owned institutions. You look at the energy trajectory of the country, the Democratic Alliance is heavily pushing for renewable energy and the moving away of fossil fuels. You look at the ANC, its energy trajectory of the country is largely based on the base load within the country, the coal belt in Mpumalanga. You look at how they are pushing vociferously at this point in time for the inclusion of 2,500 megawatts of nuclear, which the fiscus or the taxpayer about 1.2, 1.3 billion rands, but it is at a reduced scale. Remember the nuclear procurement project during the era of former President Jacob Zuma, it was 9,000 megawatts of electricity to be brought onto the grid through nuclear power. That has effectively been scaled down to 2,500 megawatts, looking at the budgetary constraints of South Africa of what it can afford at this point in time. You did see at the cabinet Lekgotla the Minister of Energy and Electricity, Dr. Khonsi Ntoramokgokpa, and a scholarly South African within the energy space, Dr. Langerman, presenting at that particular cabinet Lekgotla, saying that South Africa's economic trajectory must also be anchored around South Africa's emergence and South Africa's procurement process within this energy mix, where South Africa seeks to procure about 5,000 megawatts onto the grid, which encompasses renewable energy, nuclear, and other forms of energy generation onto the grid. You look at issues pertaining to agriculture as well, food security. You're looking at issues of trade and industry. You've been seeing the Minister of Trade and Industry speaking very much about South Africa's economic prospects within trade in the global context. That would be Pax Stow and his deputy ministers. You come and you bring in the Minister of Mineral Resources and Petroleum within the mix. That would be Gwede Mantashe as well, is going to be playing a pivotal role in South Africa's economic recovery going forward, as well as other departments within the country, Bongiwa. But there's going to be a contentious issue of land that has been given to the PAC, Zwanele Nyonso, the president, to deal with land reform within the country. But that will put him at loggerheads with the Minister of Agriculture, particularly if they push ahead with some of the land expropriation issues that they want to spearhead with, particularly when you look at arable land that the Progressive Caucus and some within the ANC are pushing for that particular land to be expropriated and to be owned by the state.